In my 6th grade English class, every Friday was free reading day. Didn't matter what you read, you just needed to spend the hour visibly looking at one of the books off of the teacher's bookshelf. There was a huge lineup of pre-approved titles for middle schoolers, mostly the staples, your Mark Twains, your Gary Paulsons, your Babysitters, your Boxcar Kids. 11-year-old me couldn't care less. Rifling through the selection of pre-approved titles, I finally found something that actually looked cool. It was a series of yellowed books that smelled like nostalgia and quickly became one of my childhood obsessions. Joe Deaver's Lone Wolf Adventures. I already know what you're thinking, Austin, is this just gonna be a video about some random boomer fantasy novels? No. No it isn't. You see, I opened one up and quickly discovered these weren't long, drawn-out, boring books at all. These were games. Now, you're probably already aware of the choose-your-own-adventure books of the 80s, in which you, the reader, are the protagonist, making choices that alter the ending. The books included branching story paths, where you would come to a fork in the road and turn to a particular number entry to move the plot forward. The Lone Wolf Adventures had this mechanic too, but these books had something else. A fully fledged role-playing game system, complete with stats, inventory, combat, and even special skills and abilities, and you kept track of all of it with this. In the front was something I'd never seen in a book before, a character sheet where I was instructed to select traits, weapons, equipment, and given a map and a blank notes page to keep track of important information that I might receive on my journey. And if I was lucky enough to survive the adventure in book 1, I could transfer my character to the next book and level up with bigger and better skills. In the back of the book was a random number chart that functioned essentially as a 10-sided die. Players would close their eyes, drop their pencil on a number, and use that to determine key factors, whether their special abilities worked during a particular challenge, whether they won a round of combat, whether the bottle they drank from contained fresh water or a witch's poison. Each read-through would be unique to the person playing. I launched into the first book and was completely hooked. I showed my friends, and before long, Friday became free gaming day. The other guys in class would literally fight to be the first to the bookshelf to grab a Lone Wolf paperback. I soon discovered the series wasn't just limited to the 3 or 4 books on my teacher's shelf, but that there was, in fact, an entire epic catalog of some 28 adventures that had been published, all utilizing the same core game system. An entire grand adventure for my character to journey through. Pretty soon I was begging my parents to order these books. I was flying through them one by one. I couldn't get enough, and by book 7 they started looking at the price tags and said, whoa, we can't just read Hatchet again. So I went to my local library and managed to find a few more adventures, and here's the cool thing. When I opened these library books up, I would find penciled in the character of the previous reader, sometimes with really intricate adventure notes and strategies for how to solve some of the book's more formidable puzzles. Some adventures had me traveling to distant lands to fight evil monsters. In some, I investigated mysterious kingdoms. In some, I was shipwrecked, stranded, and low on supplies. In some, I was flush with cash and strapped with the finest weapons and armor, only to foolishly lose them all from gambling games at local taverns. I faced wild beasts and wicked demons. I rescued captives and discovered long-lost treasures. I explored a massive world, all the while leveling up and becoming a stronger and wiser warrior. I learned special abilities in one book that aided me 5 books later, and I also made mistakes that cost me dearly, like getting frostbite in the caverns of Kaltei and permanently lowering my combat abilities. Each new adventure taught new life lessons and transported me to a world deeper than any movie could provide. Man, I miss that. Lone Wolf might not have been the first series of game books, but to me, they were the best. Set in the fictional world of Magnamund, the reader plays the role of the last surviving student of the Kai Lords, an order of warrior monks that defend against the forces of evil, sort of like medieval Jedi Knights. Your grand journey begins with the destruction of the Kai Monastery by the Dark Lords, which you have inadvertently avoided while out gathering firewood. The lowest and least disciplined of the Kai, you then set out from the monastery's ruins on a race to the capital city to warn the king of the coming invasion. As you find your way through various adventures, the lone wolf becomes stronger and stronger, eventually growing into a legend among the people of Magnamund. Originally starting publication in 1984, the books were filled with incredibly detailed and eye-catching artwork from illustrator Gary Chalk and were a hit right out of the gate, with the first book, Flight from the Dark, selling over 100,000 copies in the very first month it was out. Somehow, the series found its way into my hands at the turn of the millennium. As I grew up and my interest shifted, most of my old collection of lone wolf books faded from my life. But I've still kept a couple around for old time's sake, and for years now, I've been wanting to sit down and revisit this series. I knew that the books had started going through modern reprints, and I even had hopes that I could maybe track down Joe Deaver and interview him about his life as an author and game designer, but I kept putting it on the back burner. Things just kept getting in the way, and a couple of months ago, I finally had some time in my calendar to do a deep dive. I was finally going to make some calls, and I discovered that I waited too long. Joe Deaver died unexpectedly in November of 2016. Can you tell me, what was your relationship with him like?
I mean, like anyone's with their parents, right? Like, very complicated. He wasn't around much when I was very young, which led to some resentment. But yeah, I mean, like, you know, boys and their dads, it's always just, from my observations, it's always kind of a weird relationship. So it's this kind of clash of generations for sure, especially as I wasn't really into gaming or lone wolf. You know, I did ask him once, did it bother you that I was never a fan of your work? But he just kind of brushed it off and was like, oh, well, you were just never a gamer. You know, you never got it. You didn't get it. You didn't get how good it was, kind of thing.
Well, I guess I'll just straight up ask. I've kind of been tiptoeing around it because I don't really know how much should remain in the private sphere and how much you would like to go into publicly. What happened with Joe?
I'm happy to tell you it was a something called chromosome translocation, which is a very rare mutation where two of your chromosomes split in half and two of them end up on the top or the bottom of two others, which can cause all kinds of results from that. But his was kidney cancer. He went into hospital with a kidney stone, and they did a scan and discovered that both his kidneys were full of cancer. So then he was given 6 months to live, but he held out for 10 years. I mean, he was just in incredible spirits the whole time. I was just so proud of him for being so brave.
I had no idea at all. Is this something that he had talked about publicly? Is it something that you kind of kept within the family?
I don't even know.
I knew. It was a very small handful of people that knew. Joe tended to be really private about the actual details.
He didn't talk about it much. I mean, I don't think he wanted to think about it, to be honest.
We talked a lot about his plans to come back in with book 29. And as he started to get more and more ill, we'd talk a little less because it was really hard for him to maintain contact. All the going into the medical trials and dealing with the new drugs. When I was going through tough times in my life, he was always there. I was surprised at how supportive he could be. One of the few things that he actually asked was that when it came time, that I would support Ben in whatever he needed. And that was an easy promise for me to make.
He's just such a complicated figure, to me at least. It's funny, like I've gotten to appreciate a side of my dad that I didn't really know while he was alive, which has a kind of, it's a bit bittersweet because I can't talk to him about it. But it's given me a much broader appreciation of him as a person. It's funny that, the best time in our whole relationship was the last 2 weeks of his life because, nothing but love, really.
I learned that in the months leading up to his death, Deaver had actually been working on a final set of Lone Wolf adventure books, and was faithfully writing and developing them even in his last days. While the Lone Wolf series had been out of print in the 90s, in the late 2000s and early 10s, the series saw a bit of a resurgence due to reprints, spin-off titles, and video game adaptations.
He had this great plan for the last 5 years of this series, and then he had plans for a whole new series which he was going to call Vampirium, which was a kind of gothic vampire series.
Joe Deaver left a profound impact on the world of gaming and in the hearts and minds of readers everywhere. And while I was truly sad to learn of his passing, I was thrilled to learn that his son, along with Magnamund lore expert Vincent Lazzari, are working to continue Joe's legacy and finish the series.
It's, it's your dad's dying wish. You don't want to mess it up. It's quite a big responsibility, especially when it's the last few books of a series that's been going for nearly 40 years.
Last June, they announced their intentions to reprint the entire Lone Wolf series as a definitive edition, rolling out monthly beginning in 2021, including Joe's now completed last books, with the final brand new adventure Light of the Kai releasing in 2023.
The definitive edition, one of the reasons why it's incredibly important, we didn't get the real books. The 20 books that we got were abridged versions. Some of them we didn't get 50 different sections. We never actually got the full books. The great thing about the definitive edition is that it's going to be the books as they were intended for the very first time.
That's the main job for me, is to get the whole series out in a consistent format. It's very rare that you have a life's work like this.
This reprint is a very big deal for Lone Wolf diehards and potential new readers too, because many of the original published books, they're actually incredibly rare and list for hundreds of dollars, even in less than stellar condition. I can't wait to see how these new re-releases will look and feel in your hands. If you want to jump into these adventures for yourself, pre-orders for this definitive edition are available now on the official website. I'll put a link in the description for anyone interested. Thanks to Ben and August for sitting down and talking with me. Thanks to Joe Deaver for very cleverly getting me to fall in love with reading all those years ago. Thank you to everyone at Home Guard Press for getting Lone Wolf back on shelves. And if you are wanting to jump into an interactive fantasy adventure that doesn't require high-speed internet or the latest graphics card, but will keep you entertained for hours, give an old school hit a try. Special thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. If you have an idea for a website, they can help make it a reality. The process is simple. Start by choosing from one of their many stunning templates and then customize it to your specific needs. They've got great features like audio and video blocks so that you can get a podcast or video series up and running on your site in no time. Build your own community with their new member areas feature. Or if you want to sell something, you can set up shop with an online storefront. You can try it out for free by visiting squarespace.com. If you like the experience, then when you're ready to launch your site, head over to squarespace.com/AustinMcConnell to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.